Okay, welcome to the video for 8F, midpoint and distance. You're going to be able to find the length of a segment when given two endpoints using the distance formula, which I boxed in right here for you. You're also going to be able to find the midpoint of a segment when given the endpoints. And then lastly, you're going to be able to find one endpoint of a segment when given the midpoint and the other endpoint, okay, by using the midpoint formula. So let's jump into this. All right, so over here, I'm just going to draw a picture for you so that way you know what we're looking for. But I'm going to want you, when you do this, to actually use the distance formula and be able to show me your work for it. So I'm going to plot these points, and then I'm going to draw the segments. So these are endpoints to a segment. So 1, 6. Okay, so here's my segment. Make sure you pause the video and create your own just by plotting 1, 6 and 5, 9, and it should be in the same spot as mine. Okay, but what I want to do here is find out how long this is. If this was just horizontal or vertical, I could count up the boxes, but we're trying to figure out how long it is. And actually, this formula comes from the Pythagorean theorem, because what happens here is we're going to find out the length of this side, right? So let's say this is x. Well, we'd have to take one of the x's and subtract the other x to find out how long it is. And then we'll find the length of this side, y. So we take one of the y's minus the other y, and then we take the square root. So if you remember back, the Pythagorean theorem is a squared plus b squared equals, whoops, that's not what I meant to draw, c squared. Okay, so if I were to take the square root of both sides, that would get rid of my squared over here. Well, in this case, our a is just this length. And so instead of having a here, we have x sub 2 is how we say that, minus x sub 1, because we're finding out this length. Anyway, that's where it comes from. Now let's just go ahead and use it. So every time I do this, I like to go ahead and label these, and then I like to write this whole thing out here. Okay, so I'm going to call this x, and this one's y, and this one's x, and this one's y. And then you just have to pick which one's going to be sub 1 and which one's going to be sub 2. And it does not matter. It doesn't matter at all. So you could just go ahead and call this one, well, but they both have to be 1. If you're going to use sub 1 on this one, they both have to be 1. And then I'm going to make this sub 2. Okay, and then every time I go ahead and I write out the whole formula, just the skeleton of it. Okay, so I know I need parentheses here. I know I need a minus right there. I'm going to square this. I need a plus in the middle. And then again, there we go. All right, what that does is if I set this all up just like that, then I can just plug in my parts, and that makes it much easier for me. So I see that I'm going to do my x's, subtraction of the x's in one of the set of parentheses, and subtraction of the y's in the other set. So it doesn't matter which way you go, but if we're going to start here, we need to start with this one on the second set. So what I'm saying is 5 minus 1. So I draw those little lines to keep track, but it's 5 minus 1. And then I need to do my y's. Well, I can't do 6 minus 9. I need to do 9 minus 6. Okay, and so I just picked that this was sub 2. It doesn't matter the order. What matters is that you make sure you do it consistently. So if you start with this group and subtract that one, then you have to start with this group for the y and subtract that one. All right, now I just have it all set up. So I just need to follow order of operations. Always, right? So PEMDAS. So I'm going to start inside the parentheses here. I'm going to keep my square root over everything. So 5 minus 1 is 4. And I'm still squaring it. 9 minus 6 is 3. I'm still squaring it. So I've taken care of that. Now my exponents. 4 squared is 16. 3 squared is 9. Taking care of my exponents. Multiply, divide, and don't need to do any of that. So I'm going to add and subtract, or add or subtract. So 16 plus 9. 16 plus 9 is 25, and then I'm going to take the square root of 25, and my answer is 5. So I found out the length of this. This is 5 units long. All right, now we're going to look at the midpoint. Go ahead and pause the video again. Plot out this segment. Okay, so these are endpoints, and then draw a segment in between it, and then let's find the midpoint of that segment. Okay, there's my segment. You should have a segment as well. And what we're trying to do here is we're trying to find the midpoint of this segment. Okay, and just by looking at the drawing, we're thinking that it's like right about here. Okay, but I don't want you to draw it. I want you to actually know and use the midpoint formula. Let's look at this formula and see what's happening here, and that'll help you remember the formula. But we have x plus x divided by 2. So basically we're saying from this x, we'll add this x, and then we'll divide by 2, and that'll give us the middle of the two x's. Then y plus y, so now we're looking at it vertically like this. So y plus y, so we would take this y, add this y, and divide by 2, so we're finding the average, and that's going to find the middle of this. Now if we have the middle x and the middle y, that should find us the midpoint of the segment. Okay, so doesn't matter which one's sub 1 and which one's sub 2, but this is x, this is y, this is x, this is y. We'll just call this 1 and 1, so that makes this 2 and 2. And I just need to add up my x's. And here order doesn't matter. It did matter on distance, but since we're adding, it really doesn't make a difference. You just need to remember, well, I'm going to add my x's together. Oops, and I like to do the skeleton first. I'm going to add my x's together. I'm going to add my y's together. And that's going to give me a point as opposed to a distance, which I found last time. So here we go. If I'm finding a midpoint, I need to find an x and a y of that point. So now I'm going to plug in my x's, doesn't matter the order, 6 plus 2. And I'm going to plug in my y's, 9 plus 1. I did it backwards just to show you it doesn't make a difference. All right, so 6 plus 2 is 8 divided by 2. We're still finding a x of a point here, and then 9 plus 1 is 10 divided by 2. And then I always want to simplify, so I can put 2 into 8. That's going to go 4 times, and then 10 divided by 2 is 5. So let's see if that ended up where we thought it was going to be. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right there. There is our midpoint. Okay, make sure that when you're finding a midpoint, you show it as a point. That means parentheses, and that means two numbers with a comma in the middle. This little note on your notes, so that way you remember to write this as a point, not just, what I see a lot is one number over another number. That is not the same thing as a point. All right. Pretty straightforward on those. This one gets a little bit trickier here. So the midpoint of JK is M, which is 4, 2, and one endpoint, which we're calling J, is 0, 1. So let's go ahead and plot 4, 2 and label it M. Pause the video and do the same, please. Okay, so there is my M, and now I'm going to plot one endpoint, which is J. Okay, so this is not the whole segment. The whole segment is JK. So this is going to go past here to someplace. Sketched in a line here, but we're looking for K. We're looking for over here, what is K? Okay, and so we're not going to draw it. I want to be able to see that you can do this algebraically and not just draw it in. But we're looking for K over here. So how do we do that? Well, if you look at our midpoint formula, this tells you the x of the midpoint, and this tells you the y of the midpoint, right? So I'm just going to copy it down, but I'm going to break it apart. So I'm going to say, well, if I take x sub 1 plus x sub 2 divided by 2, that's going to give me the x of the midpoint. Okay, so that's going to help us out here because we have the x of the midpoint. Right, it's saying M is the midpoint, so this is x sub M, because that's the x of the midpoint, so this must be the y of the midpoint. And then this over here could be either x sub 1 or x sub 2, it doesn't matter, because you're just adding them together. So let's just call this x sub 1 and y sub 1. All right, that's going to help us out, because if you can find that information in here, then all it is plugging it into your formula over here. So I can take out x sub 1, and I'm going to plug in 0. I'm going to do that in a different color here. My x sub 2, I don't know what that is yet. That's going to be the x of the endpoint here, k. So divided by 2 equals x sub m. So it's saying, what is the x of the midpoint? Well, I know that the x of the midpoint is 4. So now all I need to do is solve this little equation here. Okay, we need to figure out, well, what's happening to this x? Well, it's x plus 0 divided by 2. So that means the first thing I have to do is multiply by 2. Multiply both sides by 2. They cancel out, and I'm left with 0 plus x sub 2 equals 8. And then I subtract 0 from both sides, and I'm left with 8. So my x of the midpoint is 8, but I'm not done. That's just giving me the x of the midpoint. Or I'm sorry, the endpoint. Right? I'm trying to find what k is. So I know that the x is 8. My sketch, I noticed that I just went too far. Again, I'm not going to have you do a sketch. I'm going to have you do the math here. This sketch is just to show you what's going on. Okay, so 8. Well, that makes sense. Over here is 8. So I'm hoping that this is, I'm going to find out what the y is, and it's going to end up right there. So we just do the same thing, but for y now. So we'll set it up. I have y sub 1 plus y sub 2 divided by 2 equals, what does that give me? That gives me the y of the midpoint. So y sub 1, I'm going to take out and put in the y that I've been given, right? That's one of the endpoints, 1. And then I'm going to add y sub 2. That's what I don't know. Okay, I have this endpoint plus this endpoint, but I don't know what that is. All divided by 2 equals the y of the midpoint. I almost wrote that in, but we know the y of the midpoint. The y of the midpoint is 2. Put it right there. All right, it's just a matter of solving this equation now. I'm going to multiply both sides by 2 because I'm dividing by 2 and I want to get rid of it. They cancel out here, and I have 1 plus y sub 2 equals 4. And I'm going to subtract 1, and y sub 2 equals 3. I need to write this as a point again. Okay, my final answer is 8, 3. And let's go see if that's in the right spot here. So 8, 1, 2, 3. Well, that does look like where it should end up. So what I did is I algebraically found k, this endpoint, when given the midpoint. All right, that's the whole thing. If you thought of a question, please put it right here. Thanks for watching.